As Barry lays in Sally's bed, she decides to set him up with a Facebook account. They've added everybody from class, and then she asks, is there anybody else you want to add? And he remembers a guy he served with named Chris Lucato. Sally finds him right away and adds him. Sally, though, has to get ready. She's got a big audition, so she kicks Barry out. With nowhere else to go, Barry heads to Fuchs' hotel, and Fuchs gives him the good news about their new job. Fuchs downplays the job, but when Barry opens the envelope and sees how many guys it is and how big the location is, he says, Fuchs, this isn't a job, it's a damn raid. Fuchs tells him, I know it's not a regular job, but Goron wants this stash house, and if he gets it, his profits go up, and he takes us along with him. He then distracts him with a wad of cash from the Paco hit. Barry asks him, so what, you're just going to stay in L.A. too? And Fuchs says, yeah, it's great. I mean, these guys were about to take us out, and how they can't take us out if they wanted to. You're welcome. Later that day, Barry heads to class. As he's sitting waiting for Gene to show up, he gets the alert that Chris, his former Marine buddy, has accepted his friend request. Chris even messages him and says, hey man, you in town? Let's get a drink. Barry messages him back, but most of the class is talking about Natalie's party she's having that night. She's bringing a buddy who just wrapped shooting Pinocchio. He played Pinocchio. Because of that, she doesn't want people bringing plus ones. You know, big star in the room. Gene shows up, and that quiets everybody up. Actually, they bust out in applause, but Gene starts the lesson, and it's Glengarry Glen Ross. He's given Barry quite the monologue. It's the coffee is for closers scene. But Barry bombs. Gene can't take it anymore. He actually has to stop and tell Barry how bad of a job he's doing. He asks Barry, do you want to be a doormat your entire life? Because that's all we've ever seen here. And I'm willing to bet it's no different out there. Gene is trying the same thing he tried on Sally a couple weeks ago. He's trying to rip a good performance out of Barry. We don't know if he gets it or not, but what we do know is, after class, Barry heads, finds Fuchs, curses him out, and tells him he's not doing it. He also tells him that he's going back to Ohio and Barry's staying in L.A. Fuchs doesn't really seem too intimidated by the conversation, though. One person that wasn't in class that day was Sally, because she had that audition. She had to skip class because she had to go meet with her quasi-agent. He's not her agent yet, but he does book her roles. As they're talking about the role she's going out for, he very seriously says, I get to this point with a lot of potential clients. I think to myself, do I want to sign them or do I want to fuck them? Sally doesn't know quite what to say. Eventually, she blurts out how she wants to keep it professional, and the guy actually gets a joke, although it didn't seem like a joke. Sally then heads off to the audition, but the employee at the production company has to pull her aside and say, hey, we just called your agent. He said he doesn't represent you. It's incredibly embarrassing for Sally. She has to walk out with her head held high, but she doesn't even get to audition for this role. She just heads to her car and bawls her eyes out. She'll at least be able to blow off some steam at the party that night. Barry is coming, and he's bringing her a gift. He noticed that her computer screen was cracked, so he bought her a new one. As he's driving over there, he starts daydreaming about his life with Sally together and how this could be a big moment in their relationship. This could be when she finally knew that he was the one, when he bought her a MacBook. He's also dressed pretty ridiculously. For whatever reason, he's carrying a satchel or a courier bag or whatever you want to call it, but he looks stupid. He saw it at J. Crew and the whole outfit was on the mannequin, so he said, I'll take it. As soon as he enters the party, Natalie comes up to him and says, Did you see? You see my friend Zach Burrows is here? And Zach was the one who played Pinocchio. He's also the one no one knows really who he is, but he is the biggest star at the party. People are globbing onto him. Barry asks her, how did you guys meet? And she says, well, there was like a special anonymous group for people and can't really talk about it, but yeah, so she's an addict. Barry then sees Sally and makes a beeline over to her. He asks how the audition went, and she lies and said it went great. She notices he's holding a laptop, and she says, what's up with that? And he hands it over to her. But it has the adverse effect of what he thought it would have. Instead of being touched, she's a little weirded out because that laptop is extremely expensive. And after all, they only slept with each other one time. She basically gives it back to him. Barry walks off to get a drink, but he checks his Facebook Messenger, and his buddy Chris had texted him saying he was getting beer with two Marines and if he wanted to join. Barry responded with, well, do you guys want to come to a party instead? Chris said yes, and Barry sent him the address. So Barry's standing in the party, waiting for his buddies to arrive. But one buddy of Barry's that he wasn't expecting does arrive, and it's Fuchs. Barry is so angry and taken off guard that Fuchs has invaded this part of his life. Fuchs is concerned with the fact that he was tailing Barry all day and Barry didn't notice, which is part of Barry's job. Barry tells Fuchs, you gotta leave. But Fuchs tells him, the thing that hurts the most is you lied to me. You're still going to that class. Barry, of course, admits that he is. At this point, jig's up. Fuchs tells him that he wants him to have that, but he also doesn't want him to screw up their thing. Fuchs can tell that he's making Barry extremely nervous, so he uses it as leverage, telling Barry, I wouldn't want to tell all these people who you really are after all, right? And he's able to bully Barry into taking the Bolivian stash house job. A little while later, his buddy Chris does show up. They catch up pretty quickly, but Natalie has an issue. It's not Chris, it's the two other Marines that he brought, because they're like two giant meatheads. They're acting like two 6-year-old boys. The problem is they're grown men and they're huge. Their names are Taylor and Vaughn. And they're ex-Marines, but they're also making Natalie completely uncomfortable. They're so intimidating that she doesn't want to tell them to leave, but she definitely wants them to leave. They continue to stay, drinking the free alcohol. And at one point, Taylor asks which one of the girls is Barry's, and Barry points out, oh, no, my girlfriend's the blonde. But the blonde, a.k.a. Sally, is busy talking to Pinocchio. They're having an innocent enough conversation about how he got the role and what he was doing on set, yada, yada, yada. But to a couple of meatheads far away, it looks like this guy's hitting on Sally. So a drunk Barry walks up to him and says, hey, that's my girl. I don't think she wants you talking to her. Of course, Sally is not his girl, and Sally is pissed off by this. She ends up walking away, and when Barry chases after her, she says, the hell was that? He tells her, I just didn't like the way you were talking to that guy. And she says, you didn't like the way I was talking to that guy? Who the hell asked you? We slept together one time. And what, now I'm your girl? Do not tell me what I am. And then she goes on a whole rant about how people tell her what she is, but they don't know what she is. He doesn't even have time to process the conversation because Natalie runs up to him and says, your friend's got to go. They're roughhousing so much that she can't take it anymore. But the bigger problem is they're roughhousing near Pinocchio. So Barry and his buddies get kicked out, but they're planning on hanging out later that night. Barry, who is drunk, pulls out the wad of cash that he has, and Taylor notices it. So he says, I'm going to ride with Barry. When Taylor and Barry get in the car, Taylor says, something's not right. You got all this from auto parts? You have that fancy computer, the new clothes, the nice car. And then he pulls out the Bolivian stash house envelope with all the information in it and tells Barry, whatever this is, I want in. So Barry had quite an interesting night, and he's not the only one. His acting coach did as well. Jean wanted to see Detective Moss again, so he called her up saying he had inside information, but the only way she could get it was to meet him for dinner. She was waiting for the FBI to find out exactly what was on that lipstick cam, so instead of just wait around, she decided, what the hell, let's see what the guy has to say. They meet for what is unequivocally known as a date, and the information that Jean has isn't that good. Moss tries to leave, but Jean calls her out and says, where are you going? What are you rushing back to? He starts making the case that whatever Moss would be rushing back to isn't as good as what she's got right in front of her, so she decides to stay. And the truth is, she ends up having a really good time. Before, she would roll her eyes at Jean, but now she's oddly attracted to him. Although she snapped out of that trance when her phone goes off, telling her that the FBI was able to find out what was on that lipstick cam. Jean asks her, do you want to do this again next week? And at first she says no because she's investigating the murder of one of his students, but when she leaves, it seems like they're planning on meeting again. Moss heads back to the office to find out what was on that cam, and there's Barry shooting the Chechens, but the thing is, you can't make out his face. But even though they can't make out his face, Moss knows that the profile on the screen is definitely recognizable to somebody out there. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.